The U.S. Justice Department and a group of states had sued Google. They argued that its monopoly in ad technology allowed the company to charge higher prices.
American officials are suing the country's most popular smartphone manufacturer over claims it is violating antitrust laws. The Department of Justice and 15 states say Apple has created a monopoly with its iPhone by undermining third-party apps.
Spotify's new pricing is going to make it the most expensive music streaming platform.
This morning, YouTube is once again raising the price of its TV streaming service.
A lot of them, when they launched a few years ago, they launched at artificially low prices to try and get people to subscribe, and they're now beginning to catch up.
Here's a test. Pick something that you pay for every single month. Streaming, software, internet. Now, imagine canceling it tomorrow. Not because you're wondering, is it worth the money? That's not really the question here. The real question is this: what would it cost you to leave? If that question makes you hesitate, even slightly, then you've felt it. And that feeling isn't convenience, it's leverage. And once you start noticing it, you begin to see just how deeply it runs. There's a Black Mirror episode called Common People, where a couple has to keep paying a subscription to keep a life-saving implant running. Miss a payment, and access shuts off. It feels dystopian, but what lingers isn't the implant, it's the billing model. Because we already live inside of that logic, just in less dramatic forms. Subscription models don't usually dominate competitive markets. They tend to thrive where control already exists, and control has been consolidating for a few decades now. For most of the 20th century, monopolies were treated like threats. Standard Oil was broken up. In 1984, AT&T was split into 7 companies because one phone provider had too much control. The assumption was simple: too much market power distorts prices, and eventually politics as well. Then the standard changed. In the 1980s, regulators stopped asking whether companies were becoming too powerful. Instead, they asked something narrower: did prices go up immediately? If not, the merger went through. It sounds technical, but it wasn't minor. That shift quietly reshaped the economy. Pharmaceutical companies merged by the hundreds. Hospitals consolidated into regional giants. Airlines merged until 4 controlled most domestic flights. Telecom narrowed. Tech firms acquired competitors before they could threaten them. By the time prices rose in many of these industries, meaningful alternatives had already disappeared. That's the quiet takeover. Not tanks out in the streets, nothing dramatic like that. Just paperwork, regulatory approvals, decisions made far from public attention. We're told competition protects us. If prices rise, we switch. If service declines, we leave. That's how markets are supposed to work. But switching only works when real alternatives exist. About a third of US households have access to one high-speed broadband provider. That's really not much of a choice. It's closer to an assignment, and most of us don't even think about it anymore. Walk into a grocery store and it feels abundant, but roughly 10 corporations control the majority of major food brands in America. Different logos, once you trace them back, often lead to the same parent companies. Air travel tells a very similar story. 4 airlines control about 80% of domestic routes. Meatpacking, 4 firms process most of the country's beef. Prescription drug pricing is largely handled by 3 pharmacy benefit managers. Online advertising is dominated by 2 companies. That pattern isn't random. It's consolidation, repeated across industries, and it reaches into food, medicine, travel, and communication, the systems that structure our daily lives. Modern monopolies don't look like Standard Oil anymore. They look like ecosystems. Your phone talks to your laptop talks to your cloud talks to your apps, and increasingly difficult to untangle. When switching is easy, companies have to compete on value, and when switching becomes painful, they don't have to compete the same way. They focus on keeping you exactly where you are. That's a far more predictable business model, and that's when the shift happens. You're no longer someone they need to win over. You're someone they need to retain. Ownership slowly becomes access. Access becomes monthly, and before long, permanent payments start to feel normal. Back in 2013, Adobe stopped selling Photoshop as a one-time purchase. Now, you pay monthly. Not because everyone demanded it, but because realistically, professionals couldn't walk away without rebuilding their entire workflow. The same logic spreads anywhere exit is weak. Streaming, cloud storage, enterprise software, even cars locking features behind subscriptions. This is no longer just innovation, it's insulation. Competition is supposed to discipline companies, but discipline requires exit, and exit is getting harder. That is why subscription increases feel different now. It's not just inflation, it's constraint. You're not asking, is this worth it? You're asking, what breaks if I cancel? Your photos live in one cloud. Your job depends on one software suite. Your hospital network may be the only one within 40 miles. Think about the freelance photographer whose entire entire archive is stored in one ecosystem. 10 years of work, client history, metadata. Leaving doesn't feel like freedom. It feels risky. And that's where the leverage sits. When food suppliers consolidate, farmers lose bargaining power. When hospital systems merge, prices rise without better outcomes. When labor markets narrow, wages stagnate because workers have fewer employers to choose from. This isn't abstract, it's structural. And here's what makes it self-reinforcing. Consolidation gives companies pricing power. Pricing power means more predictable profits. And with those profits comes influence, lobbying budgets, campaign access, regulatory relationships. Over time, enforcement doesn't vanish, it just softens. No villain monologue required, just incentives pointing in the same direction. Consolidate, lock in customers, extract more from what you've already captured. Competition doesn't collapse dramatically, it thins out, replaced by clean interfaces, friendly dashboards, terms of service updates. It still looks like a market until you try to leave. So the next time you get that email, the one telling you your monthly cost is increasing, just pause for a second. Don't just ask whether it's worth it. Ask something slightly harder. If this system were truly competitive, why does leaving feel like a penalty? Monopolies didn't take overnight. They accumulated through mergers, through regulatory shifts, through ecosystems that make staying automatic and leaving disruptive. Until competition started to look real, even when it wasn't behaving that way anymore. The unsettling part isn't that dystopia might arrive one day, it's that we've grown used to a system where dependency is profitable. And maybe the first step isn't outrage. Maybe it's just noticing. Noticing where you feel stuck. Where do you find this most in your own life? Let us know down in the comments below.